Washington.
And I'm Robert MacNeil in New York. After the news summary this Monday, we explore the safe havens policy the U.S. and its allies have adopted for Bosnia. We have newsmaker interviews with UN Ambassador Madeleine Albright and the United Nations Commissioner for Refugees, Sadako Ogata. Also, correspondent Elizabeth Farnsworth reports from another major UN responsibility, the elections in Cambodia. And we close with an essay about Oakland's recovery from the Great Fire of 1991.
Funding for the MacNeil Lehrer NewsHour has been provided by PepsiCo. Part of helping the world live and communicate better is keeping it well informed. That's why funding for the NewsHour is also provided by AT&T and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and viewers like you.
The new U.S. Allied effort to contain the fighting in Bosnia ran into more resistance today. The leader of Bosnia's Serbs rejected a part of the plan that establishes 6 internationally protected safe havens for Muslims. Radovan Karadzic said putting international monitors in Serb-held territory would violate Serb sovereignty. Bosnia's Muslim president strongly denounced the plan yesterday as an attempt to herd his people into reservations. Several members of the U.S. Congress also criticized it, saying it would legitimize Serb battlefield gains. President Clinton said today he was not surprised by the negative reaction. It would take some time to think about it. Secretary of State Christopher defended the new policy during a photo session at the State Department this morning.
We took action that endeavored to draw together the allies and Russia on a plan that had 3 important purposes. First, to lessen or stop the killing. Second, to contain the conflict. And third, to put increasing pressure on the Serbs. I think the plan will have that effect. The reactions of other parties I regard as preliminary. I think there'll be many other reactions coming in, but I think the plan that we devised is one that is in the interests of the allies and in the interest of our harmony, but most of all in the interests of the people of Bosnia.
Christopher also warned Iraq against launching any attacks against the Kurds. A report in the New York Times said Iraq was massing troops and weapons outside an autonomous Kurdish region in the north of the country. UN resolutions protect the Kurds. We'll have more on the Bosnia story after the news summary. Robin?
Voting continued today in Cambodia's first free elections in 2 decades. There had been fears that the Khmer Rouge, led by former dictator Pol Pot, would derail the vote with widespread attacks. But many Khmer guerrilla leaders changed tactics, urging people to go to the polls and vote for an opposition party regarded as more willing to give the Khmer a role in government. Former opposition leader Prince Norodom Sihanouk is expected to try to form a government of all Cambodian factions after the election. We have a report narrated by Louise Bates of Worldwide Television News.
These protesters had joined hundreds of Buddhist monks in a march for peace, and the second day of voting in Cambodia passed off peacefully enough. The mood remains one of guarded optimism. No one epitomizes that more than Prince Norodom Sihanouk, who is savoring this turning point in Cambodia's history. It's taken him and others, particularly the UN, 5 years to get Cambodians to accept the ballot box and reject the gun after suffering 13 years of civil war. Sihanouk used the opportunity to make an emotional appeal to Khmer Rouge guerrillas who boycotted the elections to end their campaign of violence and join the peace process. Sihanouk's immense popular appeal in Phnom Penh is undoubted, but his party, Hun Sin Pek, which his son leads, faces a daunting challenge if it's to succeed in toppling the incumbent government of Hun Sen. The Prime Minister went to Kampong Cham province to vote. Many believe Hun Sen will be returned to office. Whoever is elected will face an immediate dilemma: to confront the Khmer Rouge militarily or just hope it falls apart naturally. Or the other option, inviting Pol Pot's men to join a coalition government. Hun Sen has repeatedly ruled that out if he's elected. The fact Cambodians have overwhelmingly ignored the Khmer Rouge's threats of violence shows a nation longing to leave the killing fields behind.
There were riots in Tibet today to protest Chinese rule. About 2,000 people reportedly stoned a police station and attacked Chinese-owned businesses in the capital, Lhasa. Police fired tear gas to disperse the crowds. One person was reported killed. The protest came a day after China celebrated 42 years of control over Tibet. The former Ethiopian province of Eritrea formally declared its independence today. The country's new flag was raised during a ceremony at midnight Sunday in the capital, Asmara. The declaration came 2 years to the day after Eritrean rebels captured the capital and won a 30-year war of independence from Ethiopia.
There was a development in the White House Travel Office story today. Administration officials said they had asked the FBI to issue a statement Friday saying it was conducting a criminal investigation of the travel office. The entire 7-person staff had been fired because an accounting audit found what spokesman George Stephanopoulos called sloppy bookkeeping and gross mismanagement. Senate Republican leader Bob Dole criticized the White House and the FBI for going public about the investigation. He said he had written the Attorney General and the head of the FBI to demand an explanation. He spoke on the Senate floor.
Mr. President, I have enormous respect for the FBI, but this latest guilt by press release caper would make members of the old Soviet KGB swell with pride. There was no opportunity for hearing, no opportunity to review the charges and respond to them, no due process, just haul the White House Travel Office suspects before 250 million Americans and smear their good reputation with an attitude of, quote, guilty until proven innocent.
Stephanopoulos said the investigation was made public because, quote, we thought it was important that the facts be clarified. He said White House staff members were assessing whether the story could have been handled better. He spoke during the daily White House press briefing.
Well, clearly the week didn't go as we had planned. And
I'm asking for the cause. You keep repeating the problem. What did you think the cause was?
well, I don't know exactly what the cause was. I think there's probably a lot of different elements at play here, and I just know that for whatever the reasons, things didn't go as we would like them to go, and we're going to continue to look at that.
Stephanopoulos said he expected the mistakes of last week, including the controversies over the travel office and Mr. Clinton's haircut aboard Air Force One, would not be repeated.
The Senate today approved Roberta Achtenberg for Assistant Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. The vote was 58 to 31. Her nomination was opposed by Republican Senator Jesse Helms of North Carolina because she's a lesbian. He and other conservative senators also opposed her because of her views on such matters as allowing homosexuals in the Boy Scouts. Achtenberg is a former law professor and current San Francisco city supervisor. Here's a sample of the debate leading up to today's vote.
This militantly activist lesbian is the showpiece of the homosexual movement in the United States. A woman who threw her weight around as a member of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors when she tried to bully the Boy Scouts of America into allowing homosexuals to serve as scoutmasters.
She should not be blamed for a 34-0 decision by the United Way of the Bay Area Board of Trustees to suspend funding for the Boy Scouts. I hope that this United States Senate will not yield to the politics of division and hate.
The Supreme Court today let stand a lower court ruling that would require the Virginia Military Institute to admit women or lose state funding. The Lexington, Virginia school has had a men-only policy since its founding in 1839. The justices unanimously accepted the federal government's claim that the college's admissions policy was discriminatory. VMI's lawyers had argued that the school's program of rigorous military training would have to change if women were admitted.
The federal government today fined an Oregon-based wood products company. Pacific Corporation was charged with excessive air pollution and with giving false information to government officials. The violations occurred at 14 plants in 11 states. Under the settlement announced today, Louisiana Pacific must also install $70 million worth of anti-pollution equipment at its plant. And that's it for the news summary tonight. Now it's on to UN Ambassador Albright, the Bosnia refugees, the elections in Cambodia, and a Bob Maynard essay.
We begin tonight with the Bosnia story and the plan of the Clinton administration and European allies to try to stop the fighting there. Over the weekend, Secretary of State Warren Christopher and foreign ministers from Britain, France, Russia, and Spain agreed to create 6 safe havens for Bosnian Muslims to be defended by United Nations peacekeeping troops. The United States would not commit any soldiers, but would provide aircraft in case airstrikes were necessary. But the plan contains no provision to force Bosnian Serbs from the areas they now control, about 70% of the former Yugoslav republic. We begin with the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Madeleine Albright. Ambassador Albright, thank you for joining us.
Very glad to be with you.
The Bosnian Muslims, the people this plan is designed primarily to protect, say it's absolutely unacceptable because it doesn't force the Serbs to withdraw from land they've acquired by fighting. Why did the U.S. accept it?
Robin, we see the actions over the weekend as a very important step forward in trying to stop the fighting, make sure that this conflict doesn't spread any further, and to keep very strong pressure on the Serbs and the Bosnian Serbs. There are a number of steps as a part of the Joint Action Program, and part of it is to keep very, very tough sanctions on the Bosnian Serbs and on the Serbs themselves in order to make sure that the areas that were seized through fighting, the aggression, will not stand. Ultimately, we have to take this step by step through a variety of this 13-point program that was put out by the foreign ministers over the weekend.
I heard Secretary Christopher say in the bit that we ran that it would increase pressure on the Serbs. How does it increase the pressure on the Serbs, this plan?
Well, I think basically what is so important about this is that this is not a unilateral action, but a collective action by the leaders of Europe and ourselves. And the pressure is there because we are acting together, and we have made absolutely clear that we will continue the very tough sanctions regime. The no-fly zone will continue to be enforced, that we will work on these safe haven resolutions, and that tougher measures are always in the background if we're not able to move forward in the plan as is currently stated.
The Vance Owen plan required Serbian withdrawal from certain areas of territory they'd taken by force. By not sticking to that principle, doesn't this plan in effect ratify their gain?
No, it does not, because all along it says that we will not tolerate the keeping of these areas that were taken by force. What we're trying to do, Robin, is to take the practical steps that we can now. It is difficult, clearly, to get a movement backwards when Bosnian Serbs have taken so much land. But what we have to do is keep the multilateral pressure on, and that's what this 13-point action plan does.
Only 2 weeks ago, when he was traveling in Europe to consult the Allies, Secretary Christopher was quoted as telling officials there he had grave doubts about a safe haven policy, precisely because it would put the Muslims into what he called ethnic ghettos and thus reward Serbian ethnic cleansing. Now, what has caused him to change his mind about that?
Well, I think primarily we've done an awful lot of talking about what these safe havens will be and how, in effect, in discussing it, frankly, in our meetings up in New York, in our Security Council informal sessions, we've been talking about the fact that these safe havens are a way to have an area that is the Bosnian state. You cannot have a state without any territory, and what we're trying to do through these safe havens is to establish these as areas that represent what might at some point be a Bosnian state.
So those 8 places that we're seeing there now on the map, I don't think we've got all of them up named, but those are the 8 safe havens would be, that would be the nucleus. Even though they aren't joined up, they would be a Bosnian state.
Well, this is the discussion. We keep talking.
Polka dot state.
Well, it is what we've been talking about is what is doable on the ground. These are areas that are still controlled by the Bosnian Muslims that we wish to, through this particular mechanism, try to protect. Everybody knows that this is not an ideal situation. It's a dreadful situation on the ground, and we are trying to deal with a safe haven area as a way that really shows the legitimacy of those as being Bosnian Muslim areas.
Everybody's connected has made a lot of the fact that the Allies are all together again. Why is Allied unity more important than sticking to the principles that President Clinton held for so long of lifting the arms embargo on the Bosnian Muslims and if necessary, using airstrikes against the Serbs?
It's a practical thing, Robin. I mean, we have been our preferred option continues to be the lifting of the arms embargo. We believe that is the way that we can go. However, it is not achievable at this time in terms of a multilateral action. We are operating within a multilateral world. We have said that this is primarily a European problem. They are not
eager to go along with this at this time. And they do want to move in step with us on trying to get a unified plan to this. I do think that the weekend was very successful in terms of getting us to work together on a whole series of steps, which are really a very important step forward in trying to move what is admittedly a dreadful situation further.
We had two former Republican secretaries of state on the program last week, Kissinger and Schultz, and although they disagreed in their approach, the one thing they agreed on was they said that the United States weakened its claims to world leadership by sending the Secretary of State to ask the Europeans what they think should be done, rather than take a firm position and urge them strongly, using all its clout, to follow.
I totally disagree. I mean, I think that what our Secretary did was go forward with a position of ours on a consultative basis. We do believe that keeping Allied unity is very important. We do not want to, nor can we act alone in a situation which is primarily in Europe. And what the new world is about is that you consult with your friends and allies and you move forward.
You really consult, you don't tell them.
Well, I mean, I think that's right. I think that we are operating within a new system where we are partners. We do not want to, nor should we ask the American people to take this on alone. What President Clinton feels very strongly about, and he said it all along, is that we need to do all these things, whatever we do in the world, multilaterally, especially in a situation such as this, which is on European territory.
Let's talk about how the plan would work itself. The U.S. refused to put ground troops in. Why did it do that when some of the Europeans asked for the U.S. to put ground troops in?
Well, we see a division of labor. This is what the Secretary of State's been talking about, is that we have said that we would be prepared to protect the UNPROFOR troops through air. That has been our position all along. And it is our belief that the Europeans who have ground troops in there, that is their part of this division of labor and what is primarily a European problem. We are there. We have also been a part of the enforcement of the no-fly zone. We are the ones that have really led the way on the humanitarian airdrops. You know, I think people forget about that now. That was an American initiative that has, as of now, delivered 4,000 tons of food and 83 tons of medicine.
Is it still going on?
Absolutely, and it's very successful. And had it not been for this American initiative, who knows how much food would be getting into these areas. So I think the point to keep in mind is this division of labor, and we are dividing it up according to what we want to be doing, each of these countries together.
It's not strictly geographical, though, is it? Because there are Canadian troops there, and they're not European.
Well, the Canadians have been very supportive in this, I think, and they have been a part of this. I think the world is not appreciative enough of the tremendous efforts that the Canadians have been doing in this area.
What happens, and up till now, the Serb pattern has been not to attack the UN protection force itself, but simply to ignore the force or go by it and continue to shell and attack civilians, for instance, in Sarajevo right now. If the U.S. has agreed to protect the UN protection force with airstrikes, what happens if the Serbs don't attack the force but go on attacking civilians?
Well, I think that it's going to be harder and harder to kind of keep everything separated. I think there will be the UNPROFOR forces in various places. The situation keeps changing, and I think that the Serbs will probably continue the way they're doing, but we have in effect felt that it will be harder and harder to separate out UNPROFOR from the civilians.
I mean, for instance, right now today in Sarajevo and over the weekend, they were still shelling civilians in the capital of Bosnia, Sarajevo, and not directly attacking the UN forces there. Now, what happens in that situation? I mean, does the U.S. use its planes to attack the Serb gunners for continuing to attack civilians in the safe havens?
Well, we have said that we would protect the UNPROFOR forces when requested and as needed, and we will have to determine this as we go along. I think the point, though, to keep in mind here is that there are a number of steps in this 13-point plan that go together, and we have to keep very clear the fact that we're going to continue to keep the sanctions very tight. And by the way, again, that's something that we should not ignore as having worked. Frankly, this very tough sanctions regime is what we think brought the Bosnian Serbs to a variety of position signature. It has brought Milosevic to really saying that he now wishes to push the Bosnian Serbs into a direction of moving towards more peaceful means. So this is a very difficult process. There's no doubt about that, and we just have to keep pushing this 13-point program.
The sanctions have not caused Milosevic to agree to another of the 13 points, which is to allow monitors, UN monitors, to be stationed on the border of Bosnia to make sure that military supplies are not getting through to the Bosnian Serbs. He's saying to the world, you have to trust me.
Well, he is basically putting himself up at the moment as someone, we're going to test his bona fides on this, and I think a great deal of pressure will be put on him, in effect, to try to either abide by that sanctions part that he himself said that he would not resupply the Bosnian Serbs. And we are going to keep pushing him on that because he has to live up to what he says that he is going to live up under his own obligations as he set them up.
Let's come back to the situation of the civilians, mostly Muslims, in those safe havens. I don't really understand what protection the U.S. is offering if it's only offering to protect the United Nations troops themselves.
Well, we are, as
How does that help the Muslim civilians if the Serbs go on shelling them?
Well, the truth is that the UNPROFOR itself is there to do the protecting, and they have the mandate to, in effect, help protect the civilians and to make sure that those safe havens exist. We are there, as I said, this is a division of labor. The UNPROFOR troops are there to assist the civilians to make sure that the safe havens stay intact, and then, as requested, we provide the air cover. I do think that our decision to do that, as well as the 13th point in these 13 points, that we are prepared to take tougher measures, are part of what these important steps forward are. So one shouldn't discount the way that this all fits together.
Well, does that mean that the U.S. is still has as potential and in reserve using military power against the Serbs?
Well,
or has that been abandoned?
No, what we have said, then the 13th point, if I might read it, is we will keep open options for new and tougher measures, none of which is prejudged or excluded from consideration. So various options are on the table, and we have said that if these other 12 parts of the program do not work, we will keep open options.
Is the United States still supporting the Vance-Owen plan, or does this now, and you said earlier these safe havens might form the basis of a Bosnian state in the future, that would be different from the Bosnian state envisioned in the Vance-Owen plan, would it not? So does that mean the Vance-Owen plan is dead as far as the U.S. is concerned?
Well, we have all along talked about the fact that we need to support the Vance-Owen process and to move the process forward. We have also, in this particular document, said that whatever parts of the plan could be implemented, we would support that. So we see this as an ongoing process, and we are still working towards that end.
And does the United States still support the principle of the Vance-Owen plan that ultimately the Bosnian Serbs are going to have to give up all or part of what they took by force?
We do indeed, because what we're saying is that they cannot keep the land that they took by forceful means, and the tough economic sanctions will stay in place until that land is given up.
One other point that I'm not clear about, because I've heard President Clinton say both. Does the United States regard this now as a civil war or as aggression across an internationally recognized frontier?
The President has said both because it is both, and I think that this is the issue that is so complicated and difficult for all of us to grasp, which is that this is a hybrid. It is a civil war and a cross-border aggression, which is what makes it so incredibly complicated, and frankly, which makes it so difficult for the international community, for all of us to get our head around what this is all about, because it is not like any war that we have seen before.
Just, what happens next? I mean, if the Security Council is about to debate and vote on this plan, whether to accept it, suppose it does, then what happens?
Well, first of all, we have a very busy week ahead of us. There are various parts of this action program that will come up during the week. It is now, looks as though we will vote on the War Crimes Tribunal tomorrow. That is a very important part of this because it really is the way to bring to justice the people that have committed these horrible crimes, including rapes and killings. Then we are going to be also talking about the Safe Havens Resolution, which, by the way, it's very complicated when you're dealing within these multilateral settings to get everybody to agree on that. And then we're looking at the Monitors Resolution. And we are going to keep pushing forward these various steps to make sure that the international community keeps pushing and keeps the tough sanctions regime in place and operating together. And I can't tell you how important it is that over this weekend we were able to get that unity of these governments pushing this particular program. Comes about also a great deal, I think, with the new sense of partnership that we've developed with the Russians as a result of the work that President Clinton did in Vancouver. So I think we're seeing the evolution of a very important partnership with the Russians as well as with our allies.
Ambassador Albright, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Still to come on the NewsHour tonight, refugees in Bosnia and elsewhere, the Cambodian elections, and a Bob Maynard essay. Now, a newsmaker interview with the United Nations official responsible for trying to help the world's 18 million refugees, including those in and from Bosnia. She is Sadaka Ogata, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. She's in Washington now, meeting with officials of the Clinton administration. Commissioner Ogata, welcome. What do you think of the safe haven plan for Bosnia?
Well, I would like the safe haven plan to be a little bit more conceptually clarified. The worst possibility would be for these safe areas to become refugee camps. And so what I would like to know is whether, well, I think it has to be worked out more clearly what the safe areas are going to be. Is it just areas protected by the military in which people are allowed to live with external assistance, which I do not think is what we would like to see.
What would be the problem with that?
Well, because this will end up having people dependent on external aid for a long, long time, and this is not what brings better prospects for the people there.
You mean all their food, all their clothing, all their housing, all of everything would have to be brought into the outside?
That is a bad alternative, to my mind.
Is it your understanding that that's what they have in mind?
No, I have no idea because the concept has not been clarified. And what I would like to propose is that the Security Council, those who are the peacekeeping forces, those governments which will be participating in this, get together and see what kind of a safe area are they going to set up.
A safe area, so what you're saying, if they want to set up a safe area, it's got to be a complete safe area, you mean with schools and hospitals, community,
a kind of a normal life. Possibility for people to lead a normal life, which means that people should be given the chance to move out into the neighboring areas where they come from. Like the only safe area that we have right now, which could be a model, is Srebrenica. And this is where people from the neighboring areas have all taken refuge in the city because of the danger. But I think if the UN is going to provide safe areas, they have to have the chance to be allowed to move outside to where they were before in the neighboring villages. There has to be some assurance of a measure of productivity. We are trying to bring in seeds and tools so that they can farm again. And there should be schools. And there has to be some civil administration there.
Have you expressed this to others other than me right now?
I'm just expressing it to you because
this just happened, you mean?
This safe area concept being accepted or agreed upon by the 5 states is a very serious step. At the same time, we do not know what they have in mind.
And those people in these safe havens would be technically seen as refugees, would they not?
Well, they are refugees in all sense of the word, although technically speaking they are displaced people because they are people within their own state.
Sure, but they'd be refugees from your point of view.
Well, they are the same as refugees. Yeah. And we have been helping them all along. What I am encouraged by the agreement that has been made by the 5 parties is that humanitarian assistance is on top of the agenda. Although I hope we will be given support, money and cash and goods, both, in order to be able to carry out a humanitarian assistance.
Do you have this impression that they're going to eventually get around to saying to you, Commissioner Ogata, we now have 8 safe havens, run them for us? Is that what you think is going to happen?
Well, in fact, we are responsible for providing them the humanitarian relief.
You're doing that now.
We are doing it now, and I'm sure we will be expected to continue to do that.
All right, let's step back a moment now and put us in the picture overall as to what the situation is now on the ground, without the safe havens, etc. how many refugees, say Muslim refugees, that the UN and your folks are now taking care of or have responsibility for?
All over the world?
No. In Bosnia.
In Bosnia, in Bosnia, in and out of Bosnia, because about 1.2 million have gone to the neighboring countries of Croatia, Serbia, Montenegro, and that is 1.2 million. The majority are Muslims.
Mm-hmm. And you have responsibility for them?
Yes, we
You're
have
feeding
been,
them and taking care of them
together with the countries
Sure,
that are receiving them.
Mm-hmm.
And there are now another 2.2 million people, approximately, we are taking care of within Bosnia. And they're not all Muslims. Of course, we are taking care of Serbs who are displaced, Croats who are displaced, and the Muslims who are displaced.
And we've had many stories, many conversations on this program in the last several weeks and months now about the difficulty in bringing humanitarian. We've interviewed several people, in fact, who work for you on the ground there, and the difficulties that they have faced. Is it as bad now as it has been? Is it getting better?
The difficulties, the areas of difficulties move from time to time into the eastern, the enclaves or Muslim communities in eastern Bosnia. We have been able to move in our convoys the last few days, whether it's Srebrenica, Zepa, or Tuzla. We have been able to move. The more difficulties right now is in central Bosnia, where the fighting has been between the Croats and the Muslims.
That's the new
this
development.
So we're facing more difficulties there.
Based on your knowledge on the ground of the ground situation there now for the refugees, now we're talking about the displaced persons, whether most of them are Muslims, but they also involve some others as well. And based on what you know at this point about the plan for the safe havens, are these people going to be worse off in the safe havens under the safe havens plan than they would be now?
Oh, I think what we have to do is to make sure that they're not worse off. If we
Is
set
it
up
potentially that?
But it could be both ways. Because if safe havens assure them some sense of security and cessation of hostilities, it is a very important step towards the final solution. And this, I hope, would be very much what is going to happen.
You expect to be involved in meetings on this shortly, right, about working out the safe haven thing if it goes through the Security Council?
Informally, perhaps, because we are there on the ground and we are the humanitarian agency responsible for the humanitarian assistance.
Let me change countries on you quickly. We are about to have a report from our correspondent Elizabeth Farnsworth on Cambodia. What's the refugee situation in Cambodia?
We were able to complete the repatriation of Cambodians who had been refugees in Thailand for 14 years, and we completed that last month.
And so you've moved out of the refugee business there.
And we are just helping them resettle in their own country. And I am watching this election with great expectation and also anxiety.
Yeah. With any optimism at all?
Well, the first 2 days seems to be moving on well. The Cambodians went home from their refugee life because they really wanted to go home and start a new future. And this is a very important time for them, the election. And they choose what kind of government, under what kind of circumstances that they're going to live.
Finally, Commissioner Ogata, I mentioned in introducing you, there are 18 million refugees under your care right now in the world. Is that figure going up or is that figure going down?
It is going up and down, but the total is going up.
The total is going up.
Total has gone up. Last year, we returned 1.5 million people to their homes, and this is a very big figure. 1.2 million are those Afghans who were in Pakistan and in Iran, and another 360,000 going back from Thailand to Cambodia. And we will again be starting a very, very large repatriation operation in Mozambique.
And that's the bottom line for you and your people, is it not? Is to get these refugees back home,
and get them started in their normal life, reintegration. At the same time, the outflow has been large. Whether it has been Bosnia, has been a very, very big new kind of refugee outflow, and therefore altogether the number has increased.
New kind. In what ways?
Well, it is new kind for us because we are operating in the midst of a war, civil war, with refugees and in displaced people in besieged cities. They're not necessarily leaving, but they cannot survive without external assistance.
Yes, that's it. Well, Commissioner Ogata, thank you very much for being with us.
As we said, we look next at Cambodia's first democratic elections. They began yesterday under the auspices of the United Nations peacekeepers and monitors. More than 1 million voters turned out, despite threats of violence by the rebel Khmer Rouge forces. Balloting will continue the rest of this week. Correspondent Elizabeth Farnsworth was in Cambodia earlier this month and reports on the activities of the United Nations Transitional Authority there, known by the acronym UNTAC.
The United Nations dominates Phnom Penh like a benevolent occupying army. Peace agreements signed in Paris in October 1991 gave UNTAC, as the UN mission here is called, unprecedented power. UNTAC was supposed to keep peace among the warring factions and then leave a democratically elected constitutional assembly in place.
This is peacekeeping, peacemaking, and peace-building combined.
Yasushi Akashi is head of UNTAC.
So in terms of the sheer size, it's one of the largest peacekeeping missions which UN has undertaken, certainly the largest in Asia ever.
To accomplish its goals, UN personnel have moved into almost all parts of Cambodian life, including government ministries. They set up television and radio stations. Election workers traveled into the most remote parts of the country and registered 96% of the eligible voters, 4.6 million people. The UN High Commission on Refugees accomplished what some thought would be impossible: the return of 350,000 refugees from camps in Thailand without major incident. But the most important task was not fulfilled. The warring factions were never disarmed. The Khmer Rouge, whose bloody rule under Pol Pot in the late 1970s left more than 1 million Cambodians dead, refused to turn over their weapons. As a result, so did the other factions. They are the ruling government in Phnom Penh, headed by Prime Minister Hun Sen. This faction was placed in power when the Vietnamese invaded Cambodia in 1979. The Royalists, backing Cambodia's longtime ruler, Prince Norodom Sihanouk, and a smaller group headed by the elderly statesman Son Sann. Do you think neutral, fair elections can be held given the security concerns?
Of course not.
Marco Alter, who directs the International Committee of the Red Cross in Phnom Penh, believes the UN mission has failed.
I would say there are three major failures. The first one is, of course, the fact that they were unable to disarm the military people from the four factions. That's one point. So there is still an unstable situation and risks of a new civil war. That's the second point. And the third point is they had a very broad program for rehabilitation and reconstruction of the country. And almost nothing, only a few part of this money already came in Cambodia.
But Colonel Patrick Kamart of the Royal Netherlands Marines, who commands a battalion of UN peacekeepers, believes the UN mission has been a qualified success.
People are used to hostilities in this country for the last 25 years. And when you compare the circumstances in those years and at the moment, there is an enormous improvement. It's the first time that they have elections. And no one could have had expected elections without any problems arising.
For the family of Sopat Pak, the UN's mission is all important. Pak escaped from the Khmer Rouge in 1979. He made it to the United States, where he became a citizen. But now he's back in Phnom Penh working with the UN. Each week he visits his uncle, aunt, and cousins in a neighborhood on the edge of the city. Park's uncle says he lost 70 family members under the Khmer Rouge, including 3 of his children. His life began to improve, he says, only when his nephew returned from the United States and helped build this house, a castle for a family that had been living in a hut made of grass. He says he's worried about violence during the election. Park's aunt is nervous too. She asks her nephew what will happen to her children and grandchildren if elections don't produce a government strong enough to resist the Khmer Rouge. So Pot has no answer. He's worried too.
I hope peace is going to come back again in Cambodia. But for how long, we don't know yet.
In Phnom Penh, Sopat Pak helps run the UN radio station. Every day for 3 hours, the UN broadcasts information about the elections and provides free airtime for all political parties. On this day, the announcer was warning repeatedly against attempts to intimidate voters. Roy Head, formerly of the British Broadcasting Corporation, is a UN radio producer.
We had some announcements relating to specific things that parties aren't allowed to do, that the army are not allowed to participate in electioneering, that police are not allowed to participate in electioneering, that people aren't allowed to wear badges, political badges on their uniforms, just specific instructions to the general public.
We have come to Cambodia as volunteers to organize the election.
In the field, UN volunteers have hammered home lessons about democratic elections.
And today we have come here to explain to you about the elections and about human rights.
At this gathering near the border with Vietnam, Melissa Moy tells people made passive by years of violence that they must dare to vote independently. This district is not currently threatened by the Khmer Rouge, as are areas to the north, but there could be other problems.
Or if the village chief tells you you should vote for this party, you say, no, it's my choice. The problem I find is that we have ideas about elections, which they know nothing about. So you have to translate. Well, like this question of the check. It's not normal in Cambodia that you make a check for anything. For us, I mean, when you make a check, you learn how to do that from the very beginning. The people who are illiterate, even just holding the pencil, it may not be such an easy thing to do.
The UN has used theater groups to spread its message. In this skit, a thug tries to steal a voter's registration card. After the thug is unmasked, Melissa Moy explains the lesson.
No one can take your registration card or even ask you to write down the number. And even if they do take your registration card, you still can vote. Human right means that it is a right that all of us are born with. It's not a right that someone can give you or take away from you. It is your right from the time you were born.
Are you worried at all about your vote not being secret?
Yes, I'm worried about it, and I'm afraid. There are so many political parties around, and I'm afraid if I vote for one, the others will find out and do something to my family.
Intimidation comes from 2 quarters. From the Khmer Rouge, whose recent attacks have effectively shut down the elections in parts of the north and northwest, and from the government in Phnom Penh headed by Prime Minister Hun Sen. During the campaign, Hun Sen's government security forces have harassed supporters of the Royalist Party Phun Sen Pek. In this incident, UN police arrived in time to keep a tense situation outside a Phun Sen Pek office from erupting into violence. Government police had surrounded the building on the pretext that a thief was inside. After several hours of negotiations, the UN convinced the security forces to pull out. Prince Norodom Ranariddh, son of Prince Sihanouk, is Phun Sen Pek's leading candidate.
I think that
the so-called political environment, the neutral political environment in Cambodia is not really neutral. It is to say that, in particular, the state of Cambodia still exerts on the opponent parties, on Phun Sinh Pech in particular, intimidation, political violence, including assassinations.
The UN has refused to permit the violence to stop the elections. After the Khmer Rouge attacked a UN convoy like this one in the northwest, killing a UN policeman and wounding at least 5 Marines, some election workers were moved into armed encampments. The encampments have also become the only polling places in especially dangerous areas.
If you could do this again, do you wish that UNTAC had had a little more force?
Force is a misnomer. I think we should always be very careful about the United Nations using force. But I would have wished that UNTAC had more impressive, more large-scale military with somewhat heavier arms, with more mobility, so that even recalcitrant factions could be persuaded to obey us. But Paris Peace Agreement did not contain any enforcement clauses.
Charles Twining, chief of the U.S. diplomatic mission in Cambodia, helped write the Paris Peace Accords.
But there's one reality in all of this, and that's that many countries provided their troops or their police officers to UNTAC. And a number of these countries basically said, we do not want to take casualties. And once you begin forcing a situation, then you open yourself up to all kinds of consequences, and you've got to be prepared to deal with those consequences.
Cambodians are used to dealing with the consequences of war. These veterans were blinded or lost limbs in battles against the Khmer Rouge over the last decade. They're building a road now outside a rehabilitation center near Phnom Penh, sponsored by the Vietnam Veterans of America Foundation. Ron Podlasky, an ex-Green Beret who runs the center, believes that the UN's refusal to take on the Khmer Rouge has left the guerrillas stronger than before the peace process began.
My personal observation is that the Khmer Rouge are in a better position militarily than anyone else here. Whoever wins this election will be contested by the other groups. There will remain a civil war in Cambodia. UNTAC will go home and say, we did our job, there was an election, and the people of Cambodia will still be here to bear the weight of what has happened.
The men at this center are living testimony to what has happened to Cambodia in the past. The question now is whether the elections and the UN mission can be a catalyst for a different kind of future.
Finally tonight, an essay about the rebuilding of a wounded city. The essayist is Bob Maynard, former publisher of the Oakland Tribune.
The night of the fire. The night of the fire? How odd to me that I always remember that day as night. Actually, the fire started at noon. Noon on a bright, clear Sunday in October. The kind of day that makes you compliment yourself. How clever we are to be Californians. So why do I always remember October 20th, 1991 as night? For 2 reasons. First, in no time at all, the smoke cut off the sun. By 3 in the afternoon, half the city was dark as night. The other reason is this. Even now, 1.5 years after the great Oakland firestorm of 1991, I think of it as a nightmare. Like many of my neighbors, I still harbor a powerful wish to discover it never really happened. The raging firestorm came down our street, whipped along by winds of 55 miles per hour. The ground temperature was 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. By some inexplicable example of life's mysteries, our home escaped. Our elation was tempered by bitter reality. 3,300 of our neighbors were not so lucky. They lost their homes. At least 25 people were killed. It was the worst residential fire in modern U.S. history. The hill homes of Oakland are built into a large forest. As occurs sometimes with forests, natural conditions create forest fires. On October 20th, 1991, the wind was high, and a 6-year-long drought created a formidable stack of natural fuel. The city was ill-prepared. A brush fire simmering since the previous day got out of control. Oakland has a mutual aid pact with surrounding cities, but it also has incompatible radios and hydrant fittings and water pumps that could not withstand the flames. What made the firestorm all the more cruel is that it came in October, 2 years, almost to the day, after another spectacular disaster struck Oakland. On October 17, 1989, at 5:04 in the afternoon, a previously unknown fault line erupted. The earthquake, 7.1 on the Richter scale, brought down a double-decker freeway on top of more than 200 motorists. It was the worst earthquake to hit Northern California since 1906. Downtown Oakland was reduced to a near ghost town for months. Even today, major office buildings that once housed hundreds of workers stand broken and empty, visible wounds on the countenance of a deeply wounded city. There is no rush of capital seeking investment opportunities in downtown Oakland. Indeed, for more than 4 decades, the new job opportunities have been in the smaller cities and surrounding suburbs. The federal government will soon open this major new complex in downtown Oakland. It is a pleasing sight, but no substitute for the massive loss of private investment. The earthquake made a tough situation worse. In particular, inner-city employment continues to be hard hit. This is an old urban story, so old as to raise the question, is anything new here? What's new is the hills of Oakland and Berkeley. The hills are alive with the sounds of saws and hammers and cement mixers and all the other clamor that goes with the rebuilding of more than 1,000 homes. These hills are the scene of one of the biggest building projects in any city in the United States. It amounts to more than $1 billion in private investment. These are no ordinary homes. With ample settlements from their homeowner insurance, the Hills residents are building large. On average, the replacement homes will be 1/3 larger than the destroyed ones. Homes that would have sold for $800,000 will now bring $1 million or more. You might call this a classic unplanned case study in urban policy. Which works more effectively for people, public sector or private? The answer in Oakland is as clear as the sound of hammer driving nails on a bright spring day. Downtown, where government is mainly in charge, the earthquake wounds are still there. The inner city appears trapped in permanent doldrums. The hills, driven by private financing, are well off again and on their way to new levels of value. The contrast is a striking metaphor of our time. The situation brings to mind an old English poem. They stood aloof, the scars remaining, like cliffs which had been rent asunder. A dreary sea now flows between, and the distance is even wider. I'm Bob Maynard.
Again, the major stories of this Monday: the new U.S. Allied effort to contain the fighting in Bosnia, ran into more resistance from supporters of the Bosnian Serbs and the Bosnian Muslims. President Clinton said he was not surprised by the negative reaction. And Secretary of State Christopher warned Iraq against launching any attacks against the Kurds. He was responding to a report Iraq was massing troops and weapons outside an autonomous Kurdish region. Good night, Robin.
Good night, Jim. That's the News Hour for tonight, and we'll see you again tomorrow night. I'm Robert MacNeil. Good night.
Part of helping the world live and communicate better is keeping it well informed. That's why funding for the MacNeil-Lehrer NewsHour is provided by AT&T and by PepsiCo. PepsiCo. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and viewers like you.
I'm Nancy Marshall with OPB Radio. Tomorrow morning from 5 to 9 on OPB Radio, it's Morning Edition. Tomorrow, the Labor Department investigates a new kind of illegal child labor. That's tomorrow morning on OPB Radio.